Hi, everybody. Welcome to this seminar. We just waited a couple more minutes to give others an opportunity to get on the call, so thank you for your patience. I know there's quite a few of you that have already been on these webinars that we're doing with Dr. Silverman and also Mr. Sullivan, but I feel I need to explain a little bit about Dr. Silverman and where he comes from, just so people understand the expertise that goes behind the name. First and foremost, though, my name's Simon Ramshaw and I run Erchonia Lasers, which is UK based and is a subsidiary organization of Erchonia Corporation in the US. So welcome to those across the pond that also have joined. And I gather there is also some delegates from all over Europe, Pakistan, UAE, and also our UK patch as well. So thanks for attending. Dr. Silverman is doing this webinar specific to health and immunity and natural perspective for a novel time, which I'm sure you will all agree we are in at the minute. And this follows on again from the very successful webinars he's done over the last couple of weeks on musculoskeletal laser therapy, proven protocols for clinical success, which was very positive. And so was enhanced sports performance with low-level laser that he did last week. We will be happy to assist you further on at the end of the webinar. As you'll all notice down the right-hand side, there is a questions column. So please, as the webinar is going on, put your questions in there. And then Julie and myself will deliver the questions to Dr. Silverman at the end of the webinar. But now to Dr. Silverman. His resume pretty much speaks for itself, to be fair, and I think the majority of you know it by now. He's a leading US chiropractor, clinical nutritionist. He's a national and international speaker who has done a lot for us across in the UK last year and was going to do something for us in Netherlands and also in Dubai. But obviously the coronavirus thing is doing its best to cancel those talks. He's the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Inside Out Health. And he's also the founder and CEO of Westchester Integrative Health Center over there in New York. We work very closely with Dr. Silverman. He was actually the principal investigator on our level 1 FDA study on neck and shoulder pain carried out with the EVRL. And guys, please look out for his new book, which I'm really looking forward to read, which should be out around August time. It's called The Superhighway to Health. And yeah, this is going to be a pretty damn good read. So I'm really looking forward to that. So without further ado, Dr. Silverman, over to you.
Thanks so much, Simon. I really appreciate all the warmth that you guys have shown me. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. This is our third webinar, and I believe this may be the best one I have. We did a composite of this in the US, and I was very happy to hear that it was very well received. It is time. I mean, in the recent weeks and maybe months now, many of our world's practitioners have undergone significant transformations. If you don't already know, I live in New York. I'm in Westchester County, so we were the first to get hit in the States. And the bulk of my patient base who lives here, we're 30 minutes from the city, works in the city. So we were, if you will, we're in the eye of the storm. So this has been a 24/7 last 6-week conversation, and this is a compendium of all the information that you guys can bring to your office. And one thing I'd like to say starting out is that this will end, and we know that. The question is, what's the new norm? The feeling I get, and I'm in contact with my patients, believe it or not, via email and other means, everybody wants to know about 3 things. They want to know about their health and immunity, like we're going to discuss. They're in pain because they haven't seen anybody, and some of those surgeries they're not going to be able to get to. And 3, some of them got a little heavy. So you've got your roadmap already to get ready for your patients and your new patients as they come back, in that health and immunity is going to be at top of the mind, pain, and of course, body contour. So those 3 things, when you look at laser and laser synergistic role and things that we do as chiropractic, we're going to be able to help a lot of people coming out of this, and the people need our help. So let me give you a quick nutshell about what's going on, sort of a review of COVID-19. Actually, somebody emailed me, they were going to be on today, and they said, what does COVID-19 mean? CO, COV is corona. It's a triple spike virus, so it looks like a crown. They call it corona. VI, virus. D, disease. And 19, it's the year that it was labeled, which was December of 2019, hence the idea of COVID-19. In a nutshell, seasonal flus, and this is not a seasonal flu, are all human viruses. So you have a DNA and RNA chain. This is an RNA chain. This was started from animal to animal. As we all know, it mutated and went from animal to humans. And then a few weeks later, it went from human to human. And as you say, the race was on, or the game was afoot. This RNA sequencing of genes inside the virus isn't human, so we couldn't fight it off. The takeaway here is nobody had built-in immunity to it, because this is a vastly new virus. It's 86% the same genome of the previous SARS-CoV. Having said that, that 14% and the triple spike that it possesses and this tropism makes it a very difficult virus. Now, many people have asked, interestingly enough, just to give an overview, why are we having such trouble in America? Well, you know, I can speak to the UK, and your numbers are close to ours in that, number one, it's a very unique virus. And number two, you're going to see that this is also a lifestyle issue. Those who have these comorbidities that we're going to talk about have gotten it at a higher rate, and also have gotten a lot of the symptomologies a lot more powerfully. So having said that, let's move on. Here's a huge takeaway. You cannot control the virus, but you can control the host. The host is us. The host is our patients. We need to make ourselves an inhospitable host for this virus. Viruses are really not alive. They're active or inactive. So we don't, one, want them to be active, and two, we don't want to invite them in. So factors that make us more likely to contract COVID-19: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, hypertension. When you look at the centerpiece, obesity leads to CVD, diabetes, obesity, hypertension. Age, well, there's a biological age and there's a chronological age. And as you look down the list, one of the bigger things is autoimmune conditions. In America, we're 340 population, 30 million Americans are taking immunosuppressive drugs. Don't have the numbers in the UK. I couldn't find those. Some more stats. 71% of those hospitalized with COVID-19 in the US and 78% of those in intensive care have underlying health conditions like diabetes, chronic lung, heart disease, and about a fourth of the people walking around that have it are not showing any symptomology, and that poses the contagion problem. Underlying conditions among hospitalizations with COVID-19. At the end of the day, when you look at this, and we'll probably say it a couple of times, from 18 to 64, the number one reason that people go to the hospital with COVID-19 is obesity. And I think Zorona when I hear that. Over 65, hypertension. And believe it or not, there's a direct correlation with the hypertension and vagus nerve, which we'll detail, and your gut health. So we have to take a few steps forward and not look at the obvious sometimes, because we leave that for the doctors who just look at symptoms. We always want to look at systems and root cause resolution. So here's your hospitalization rate. As you can see, the takeaway here is as you get older, you're hospitalized more. Clearly, you get more comorbidities. And obviously, as we age, our immune system weakens. One of the biggest culprits in that, and I will share a video on it, is the thymus gland. So without question, when you have the EVRL, you're able to stimulate, in my opinion, the thymus gland and build your immunity. Hypertension was the number one comorbidity here. CVD 2, obesity 3. As I said earlier, obesity can lead to CVD and hypertension. And I told you before, the younger and older groups, what they most commonly had while they were hospitalized. Very interesting in that the median incubation period is 5.1 days. They've got that solid. So I think the longest is about 11.5 days. but the bulk of them have that within those first few days. And again, 5.1 days is your median incubation period. So when we talk a little bit about antibodies, you're going to see this timing, and it's going to be very intriguing, the idea of antibodies and incubation period. Here's some symptoms in coronavirus or COVID-19. Differentiating between non-severe and severe. Obviously, the number one symptom you see is fever. And in that fever, the difference is not really a lot between non-severe and severe. Cough the same. However, when you get to fatigue and chest or shortness of breath, there's a huge differentiation. We are inundated where we are. So if you were to call the hospital and say I have a fever and a cough, and you did not have shortness of breath, they probably would say just stay home. Those people obviously are not getting tested. So interesting stats. The loss of smell or taste might be an early sign of infection with the pandemic virus. About a third of the people are testing positive. There is a succeeding study in April that talked about this as a diagnostic tool. If someone comes in with a loss of smell or taste, that you can consider it diagnostic for COVID-19. If you lose your sense in your smell and taste, those are cranial nerves. That implies that there's damage to the central nervous system. This was in the Washington Post last month. The coronavirus isn't alive. That's why it's so hard to kill. Kind of piggybacks on what I said earlier, in that it is not live. It's activated or inactivated. A leading virologist at Johns Hopkins University, a fine university, said about the virus: they break into your home, eat your food, use your furniture, have 10,000 babies, and they leave the place trashed. That's what the virus does. So this was the New England Journal of Medicine, and it really delineated a very interesting number in that it found that it was certain surfaces, plastic and steel, had transmissible surfaces for 72 hours. The cardboard was 24, 4 hours on copper, 3 hours in the airborne aerosol. And of course, everybody talks about the cruise ship Princess, and basically half of the people, almost half of the people, 46.5% of the people were asymptomatic at the time of testing. They found that the virus lived on the surface in that Petri dish for up to 17 days. Now, a lot of people have talked about this thing called RO or R naught. Essentially, it means that if I have it, how many people I will infect. Originally, they talked about the R naught being 3. That would have been devastating for the world. When I saw the models in America, and they were talking a large amount of deaths, close to 1 million, that's when the president got very concerned, clearly. It was much more than they anticipated. Right now, the RO in America is 2.1, and that's why we're looking at 100,000. So always look at that R. That R will determine, if you like to use models, will determine the outcome. Now they're talking about 27 feet for distancing. If you sneeze, you can project some of the particles 27 feet. So I'm going to be considering going back to my office. We have masks. We're looking at some splat masks because, you know, as chiropractors, we get in people's grill. I think the number one thing that we can do is help our patients build their immune system, support their immune system. And a term that I like to use now is immunorejuvenation. So why did it spread so easily? Why was there such a contagion? It's very simple in that the SARS-CoV and the SARS-CoV-2, as I said earlier, shared 86% of the genomic sequence. The big issue here was these spike proteins. That are what coronaviruses use to bind to the membrane of the human cells that they infect. The binding process is activated by certain cell enzymes. And when it binded, it was at least 10 times more tight than the corresponding spike of the previous SARS. So one, it's able to bind through what we call ACE2 receptors. Number two, it was able to stimulate a protein called furin. The presence of furin enzymes on all cell surfaces cleave and activate the SARS-CoV-2 into a wide range of tissues and organs at the same time. Big takeaway. It can affect tissues and organs at the same time. This activated unleash the NLRP3 inflammasome. That inflammasome released these cytokines and ultimately released interleukins 1 beta and interleukin 18, leading to an excessive amount of release, leading us down a path of cytokine storm. So I want to do this in a little bit more of an epigrammatic way because I think a lot of people do have some of the strong background now. Ultimately, after the furin, it also stimulated a 3CL protease. So once the virus has entered the human cells, coronaviruses produce damage and spread to other cells by creating their own 3CL protease. Although several enzymes may be involved in viral replication and spread, 3CL protease is the most important for the coronavirus, unfortunately. So here's your ACE2. Now, ACE2, you have your ACE2 a lot, obviously, on the lung. You also have it on your gut, liver, and kidney. And you also have ACE2 receptors, or if you will, of your heart. The coronavirus, when it comes to the heart, is very interesting in that it damages the periocytes. So ACE2 is a cell receptor responsible for mediating infection by SARS-CoV-2, which is very novel. The SARS-CoV-2 infects alveolar epithelial cells through the ACE2 receptor. The destruction of these epithelial cells and the increase of cell permeability lead to the release of the virus. Ultimately, the virus activates the innate immune system. This innate immune system calls on the adaptive immune system, ultimately leading you down a path of damage to lung structure. I found this most interesting in that the takeaway in this slide, very simply, is that if you have type O blood, you had a better outcome than if you had type A blood. So let's talk a little bit about the immune system. I have never read more about the immune system and never heard people talk more about the immune system than currently now. Number one, we have barriers. Our barriers are our skin, our mucous membrane, our enzymes, our bacteria. So our skin's a barrier, there's a lung epithelial barrier, there's a gut barrier. We have to always remember that that's part of our defense mechanism. Number two, an innate immunity. That's our neutrophils and macrophages. That's something that God gave us. That's our first line of defense. At some point, we call in our adaptive or acquired immunity. Those adapted or acquired immunities, something we actually acquired about 10,000 years ago in the human species, and it now adapts. It determines what to do. In that determination, it releases B and T cells. T cells come from your thymus, and B cells come from your bone marrow, and that's where you get the release of immunoglobulins, and that's where we have the conversation of IgM and IgG. So that's the issue, that's the problem. Let's talk about supporting your immune system. Let's tell our patients to avoid certain foods. I always use the acronym of GPS, no gluten, no processed food, no sugar. I use DNA, no dairy, no nicotine, no artificial sweeteners. Have them follow an anti-inflammatory diet, adhere to all the things that were aforementioned, in addition to no fried foods and any food that you're allergic to. Believe it or not, I'm doing a lot of food allergy testing now, because if someone's allergic to food or a food, their inflammation is increased, leading you down to, towards a threshold that may put you over into a cytokine storm if a pathogen attacks your body. Always detect and avoid food sensitivities. Remember, diet for immune resilience. You want your immune system to be resilient to pathogens. A proper diet will enhance your immune system. A poor diet will impair your immune system. In addition to immune system, I also want to share that without question, you want to use low-level laser. And I'm going to show in detail how it helps your immune system in several slides, literature, and in addition to that, also some of the videos. So always eat the wild smash fish. Wild fish is a great choice. Smash salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring. Stick to a plant-based diet. Fruits and vegetables are a great choice now. Your grass-fed meats, high fiber, nuts and seeds. The oldest ethnic penicillin ever created, chicken soup. Nothing wrong with organic dark chocolate. You can add more herbs to this, but just as a starting point, ginger and turmeric, bone broth. Please hydrate, appropriate fluid intake. I know you guys like tea across the pond, and it's great, especially green tea. We like a little Java here, so organic coffee if that's your drink of choice. The oils are extra virgin olive oil, avocado, macadamia nuts. Also consume a lot of mushrooms, include nuts, avocado, olive oil in your diet. The acid that comes from these foods stimulate the defense enzyme mechanism of SIRT1. Consider a time-restrictive eating or intermittent fast. We could spend the whole webinar just on this topic. Essentially, when we talk about time-restrictive eating, we give a time frame, say 16 and 8. 16 hours is your fast. 8 hours is the framework in which you eat. Time-restrictive eating is inexpensive. It doesn't cost you a cent. It's much easier to do because most of ours are home now. Having said that, time-restrictive eating boosts your immune system because it decreases a lot of poor blood markers like blood sugar. In addition, it provides autophagy. Autophagy is your ability to eat its own cells and produce new cells, and those new cells go to my theme of immunoregeneration or rejuvenation. Get sufficient sleep. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep. It rejuvenates you and your immune system. The Erchonia violet red laser. There is nothing better. I use it every day on myself and my wife. We're going to go into fabulous detail why you want that now. And you want that now. The reason is it can take care of yourself. And if we're not healthy, we're not able to administer healthcare. Secondly, you become familiar with it. And thirdly, as we come out of this in our new norm in our 2.0, you become familiar with the usage of it. And that's important. I've always felt that a doctor looks like a doctor because they're very comfortable in their setting, and it doesn't look like the first time they press the button, and it's easy to start with. Home exercise plan or work with a practitioner online. Humidity, believe it or not, relative humidity in the house should be about 50%. So here are some immune boosting supplements. It is not a nutrition seminar, so I don't necessarily feel the need to go into grave detail. However, vitamin C, without question, is a great choice. Vitamin C is immune boosting. It decreases viral replication and it decreases symptomology. Zinc the same way. Mixed mushroom complex will give you a boost to your immune system. Vitamin D3, I probably have 30 articles already. D3 with K2, about 5,000 IUs. That's the metrics that we use here in the States, have shown to decrease upper respiratory issues. Vitamin D, without question, it boosts your immune system. It would be a first choice go. Probiotics. You're going to see that the gut is implicated in damage in COVID-19. Liposomal glutathione. Glutathione is your master antioxidant. Beta-glucans also is immune boosting. Omega-3 fatty acids, a critical element for cell membrane health. Elderberry, an herb that got beat up a little wrongfully, great for airway issues and upper respiratory. And vitamin A has a cornucopia of literature why you would want to use it for immune boosting and decreasing viral replication. Now, having covered some of the nutritional supplementation, and if you have some questions about that, feel free. I'll give you the opportunity to contact me on that. Here we have this beautifully aesthetic base station. In the base station, we have 3 handheld lasers. Typical base station is 2 accelerates and 1 EVRL. You can see the EVRL, it's the one on the right, and it has a slightly different color because it has a purple color in the front. So the accelerate, great starting point. Accelerate your healing. The accelerate is a 635 nanometer light that helps in musculoskeletal lights, and the red light has also been shown to decrease multiple interleukins in studies. In addition to that, the EVRL carries the red light, but it also features the red light of 635 nanometers. It also features the 405 violet light. And I wanted to highlight that handheld for everybody because under the circumstances now, it would probably be my go-to selection. They're all fabulous. Base station is a complete handheld laser healthcare system. If you want to treat more people than one at a time, if you want to use several lasers at a time, or you have another doc practitioner with you, the base station is the way to go. So let me get a little granular and break down the EVRL, the Erchonia violet and red laser. Once again, it's very easily to use. It's maybe a pound. It's easily programmable, and it mixes the red and the violet laser. So here's a slide very simply taken from the internet. When you look at this combination, you're looking at the Erchonia 635 nanometer. That is the therapeutic sweet spot for specific things like musculoskeletal, wound healing, inflammation, and the such. The EVRL violet light, 405 nanometer, is on the spectrum that is antimicrobial. So let's look at the combination of musculoskeletal antimicrobial and build from there. Why would I want the violet light? Well, the violet light enhances physiological outcomes because it has more energy per photon, not as power as milliwatts. Yes, we only need milliwatts. Laser's effectiveness is on absorption and penetration. It's not on power. The wavelength is the critical element. These wavelengths have been studied, and you don't want too much power because when you had too much power, you create heating. The Erchonia lasers are photochemical, not photothermal. Now, the advantages on that versus others are very simple. In that, number one, you don't want to heat a brain, you don't want to heat a nerve, you don't want to heat an acute condition. You may find it plausible for a chronic condition, whereas photochemical is good for all the aforementioned conditions: nerve, brain, acute condition, and chronic condition. So again, why the violet light? It works in a shorter period of time. It's antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, and has a great response to boost the immune function or systems. This study speaks to the idea that a 405 nanometer light has bactericidal effects on a wide range of medically important bacteria. Here's a study that shows that it helped ameliorate Staph aureus, which is a pathogenic bacteria. So I find this to be extraordinarily effective for skin lesions. That's why it has in America an FDA clearance for acne. Now, this is one of my more favorite studies. Here is a 405 nanometer light, which was used for the inactivation of pathogens and its potential role for environmental disinfectant on an infection control. The trial results were very simply, it could provide continuous disinfection of air and exposed surfaces and occupied areas of the hospital, substantially enhancing cleaning and infection control procedures. So you will see in my video how I use it to clean surfaces also. Here I'm doing it. I'm home, so I had to take a picture. I'm actually doing a vagus nerve stimulation. However, this study right here is proof of concept in viral inactivation. It showed the efficacy at 405 can be extended to medically important viruses. Nobody's saying it's ameliorating COVID-19. We're just saying it's positive outcome on inactivating viruses. So antibacterial fungal effect on the 405 nanometers. Irradiation of the 405 laser in this study shown to have a significant bacterial fungicidal effect. B. gingivitis was inhibited by 60% with a 5-minute exposure. P. intermedia is an 80% inhibition with a 5-minute exposure. And C. albicans was at 90% for a 10-minute exposure. So the key takeaway here was 405 nanometer irradiation was a strategy for prevention and treatment of endodontal infections. So what's most susceptible to violet light? Well, pathogenic bacteria, gram-positive and gram-negative. Microbacterium, mold, yeast, fungus, virus. One of the big takeaways in the laser for me is it kills the pathogen but doesn't damage the host. I'll say that again. Studies are showing that it kills the pathogen with no adverse effect to me, the host. This study speaks to neuralgia. So low-level laser within the first 5 days of herpes zoster eruption reduced the incidence. So that's great. And that's right there, September 2016. There's your citation. So how do I differentiate the red and the violet laser? What's the big difference? And if you want this, I know Simon and the team have a great piece of paper front and back that really expands and goes into more detail than even I have here. The 635 nanometer Erchonia laser. By the way, Erchonia has 18 FDA clearances in America, many of which speak to the idea of musculoskeletal outcomes, body outcomes, and now some immuno improving outcomes. The 635 is a modulator. It increases energy flow and dissipates energy if it's too high. It promotes increased energy through the stimulation of the mitochondria. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. It enhances the production of ATP. It does so by stimulating the mitochondria. That mitochondria that we spoke about before, what's the number one body part that appreciates stimulation of mitochondria? The brain. It also, by enhancing the efficacy of ATP production, enables that production to be more efficient and decrease the side effects of the Krebs cycle, which is the release of free radicals. So in essence, it's decreasing free radicals because of its efficiency. So in some ways you can say it's anti-aging and also positive for all health outcomes. In addition, it helps with protein synthesis and pain reduction. It creates an improvement in collagen fiber formation to aid in wound healing. Finally, it decreases pain and muscle spasm while also increasing strength and range of motion. The red balances the parasympathetic nervous system and enhances microcirculation of blood to lymph, and it balances the cell-to-cell communication because we all know the body's all interconnected. The 405 nanometer laser is more of a sympathetic nervous system. It helps the body's defense to eliminate bacteria, virus, fungus infections. Interesting, in an advanced seminar, I will show you how the violet light can be used as a diagnostic tool to open up and share a hidden weakness. So this was a FDA cleared trial that I was the lead clinical investigator, and we got an FDA clearance. So what I did and what was done in the trial is that we used the EVRL, my favorite handheld, which is 635 nanometer and 405 nanometer. Patients had pain over 30 days. They actually had an average of pain of almost 12 years, most of which he never wanted to go to a chiropractor or were frustrated going to a chiropractor. Fortunately, not this chiropractor. The treatment lasted for 13 minutes, 13 points. We used a visual analog scale. The patient gave their hopeful subjective opinion in a 3-minute interval after 24 and 48 hours. The predefined level was a 30% decrease on the visual analog scale for 65% of the subjects. The results were stellar. 75% achieved a greater than 30% decrease in the VAS pain. The score remained at 24 and 48 hours, which was really outstanding for me to see. In addition, we had a secondary efficacy of a change in the range of motion, and patient satisfaction improved. The conclusion: overall treatment with the red and violet laser outperformed FDA-approved red lasers with respect to the change in pain scores and increased shoulder range of motion. The range of motion increased, I think it was 27% more than previous studies. So my quote, my takeaway was very simply, the addition of the violet light application with the red light has revolutionized my approach to treating musculoskeletal injuries. The light synergy has increased my clinical outcomes substantially. I got the laser originally because I have congenital torticollis. I needed something to treat me because it was hard to start to adjust my cervical. I then loved the results, utilized it in my friends and family, brought it into my practice, and been going forward ever since. So I am a user of the low-level laser. I have a pretty busy practice from Monday to Thursday, and I travel from Friday to Sunday. The first thing I did when I had to close my office for COVID-19, temporarily, of course, was take all my lasers home. So I had access to the FX, the base station, PL Touch, and the such. So let me share a virus upper body protocol with you. Hey everybody, it's that demo time. I'd like to show you the upper body virus protocol. you're going to find this very helpful in your practice, and obviously it's going to be very popular. As you can see, I'm in my gym downstairs. I'm home. My wife, please come in. She's going to play the patient, so that's why we're not wearing any gloves or anything like that. So we've taken all the needed precautions, and I just want to show you some of the things that I would do for the upper body virus protocol. So I'm going to go for the inner ear down through the maxilla towards the mouth. Now, I'm only going to use the violet light. I should show you there. And I'm going to use the violet light. You could use the violet and the red. I don't have a problem with you using both. So I'm going to do the right side. Now I'm going to go over to the left side. Obviously, this is not a full treatment. This is for demo purposes. While I'm here, I'm going to go right to the nose portion. There's a tremendous amount of viruses and bacteria that live on the outside of the nose. I'm going to ask you to open the mouth, go for the hard palate, get inside the tongue, kill any viruses, any fungus, any bacteria in there. Then I'm going to come up to the forehead. If she has any sinuses or any headaches, we're going to try and help her out. I go right for the apex of the lung. So here's that apex of the lung right here on one side, apex on the other. And then I'm going to come right in here and work the cervical, the neck region, if you will. One of the little extras that I try and give my patients, obviously, again, we don't have to wear gloves, is I'm going to laser her hands. You know, you never know what they picked up. She could transfer it to her face, transfer it to her hair, transfer it to me. Someone can rub against my chest inadvertently, and I don't want to be a carrier, so we'll do both hands. So one of the things that I would strongly recommend is the EVRL, and the EVRL is very handy because it really, with the two lights, the 405 and the 635, give a synergistic outcome. I was using the 405 for demonstration purposes because it's antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antifungal. We'll see you back in the webinar. So that, as you guys can all see, that's my gym basement. We had to do these while we're in the house, unfortunately. But as you can see, I brought my lasers home. My wife had to come behind the camera and be my patient because it was either that or my spine, my model spine. But that's a great upper body virus protocol. I use that extensively. Those are the frequencies in the the left corner, and the frequency is the frequency that the light hits the person per second. And we can go into detail on that if you have any questions. I don't want you to get hung up on a frequency. I want you to see the efficacy of the laser light. So the next big thing, you know, Simon had mentioned it about the vagus nerve. I'm a vagus nerve guy. So let's briefly go through the basic anatomy and the functions of the vagus nerve. So at this point, I think that I will probably go over 10 minutes. So if you would be so kind, I'm going to answer questions. I'm going to stay on longer. I will probably be 10 minutes over. I've timed it out for another 30. I'm going to try and give you all this information that I can. It was hard to get rid of things. I thought there was a lot of valuable things that could be implemented for you. So I didn't want to cut that much and, you know, do it to 45 minutes. So I know we're home, so let's go through it and I'll get you done before tea and coffee time. So the vagus nerve goes from the medulla oblongata down through the transverse colon. It's from the brainstem to that transverse colon. It attaches to the outside of the transverse colon. Because it's on the outside and has to sense what's going on inside the gut, it is mostly 80 to 90% afferent. So being mostly afferent, now you can see, interestingly enough, the vagus nerve innervates so many different organs on its travels. The reason they call it vagus is because it is the great wanderer. However, please make note, I wish I could circle it, that it also has an effect, interestingly enough, on the kidney. It also has an effect clearly on the colon, stomach, but most predominantly also on the lung. So the vagus nerve's primary functions, parasympathetic, which are responsible for the operation of the digestive tract, heart rate, and respiration. Special sensory provides sensations of taste from behind the back of the tongue. Sensory, operating specific mechanisms of the abdomen, heart, lung, and throat. Motor, enabling the movement of neck muscles, enabling speech and swallowing. Great takeaway here is low vagal tone. So the premise is that you want your parasympathetic and your sympathetic system to be balanced. Unfortunately, they're not like volume levels. They both can't go up or down. It's a seesaw. So when your sympathetic goes up, your parasympathetic comes down, and the reverse is true. So you always want that balance between the two. The key to having parasympathetic level balance is vagus nerve tone. When the tone is low in the vagus nerve, you see an incidence of IBS and IBD, which favors peripheral inflammation. Make note, vagus nerve, peripheral inflammation. A decrease in tone is a decrease in hydrochloric acid, pancreatic enzymes, and bile. Bile is a critical element for digestion and the ability to avoid small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. So, targeting the vagus nerve through stimulation would be of interest to restore homeostasis in the three-way calling, as I like to refer to it, microbiota gut-to-brain axis. Stimulating the vagus nerve not only reduces inflammation and increases acetylcholine, improves outcomes in RA, and guys and gals, inhibits cytokine production to the tune of 30%, with the cytokine storm being such a large conversation piece. Vagus nerve also enhances motor and cognitive recovery. It decreases blood-brain barrier breakdown, and it allows for neuroprotective effects. Bottom line here is a very exciting takeaway. They had mice that had autism. They gave it bacteria, probiotic of L. reuteri. The ASD decreased precipitously. When they removed and gave these mice vaginotomies and still gave them L. reuteri, all the ASD came back. So you need to take the probiotic, but this proved in mouse studies that the vagus nerve was the critical communicator between the gut and the brain and the brain and the gut. So here's a vagus nerve nutritional support. There are some probiotics that you can use, short-chain fatty acids like uric acid, increase your fiber, take specific nutrients like taurine and ox bile to increase bile flow. Omega-3 fatty acids increase heart rate variability, which is a critical element in determining health. L-citrulline, and of course, your fasting or time-restrictive eating, and sleep some more. So let's talk about the cytokine storm. So many people have heard about it. I'm going to do it in a very quick manner. It is an awful double-edged sword because we need a certain amount of inflammation, but when we have too much, we get damage. So most patients with severe COVID-19 exhibit substantially elevated serum levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, including interleukin-6, interleukin-1b, as well as a multitude of other interleukins. This all is characterized as a cytokine storm. Also, C-reactive protein and D-dimer are found to be abnormally high. High levels of these pro-inflammatory cytokines lead to shock and tissue damage in the heart, liver, and kidney, as well as respiratory failure and multiple organ failures. So you need to mediate extensive pulmonary pathology, leading to massive infiltration of neutrophils, macrophages, diffuse alveolar damage, and damage to the alveolar wall. The bottom line is this overwrought in inflammation. The key is, obviously, if we could avoid the pathogen, but more so to keep our inflammation down. If we keep it down and we have this pathogen, we won't go into this storm where this excessive amount of pro-inflammatory mediators come and damage our organs. So we're looking at lifestyle, laser, things to keep inflammation down. It's a critical element because if our inflammation before the pathogen comes in that's too high, we're going to easily, as a populace, as a person, go into this imagination or this imaginary, which will become real, cytokine storm. So that cytokine storm essentially stimulates NF-kappa B. And well, let me take a step back. The NLRP3 inflammasome leads to the cytokine storm. Stimulating NF-kappa B, and you can do so at your gut level and other cell levels. Interesting at the gut level. Having said that, NF-kappa B gets stimulated and ultimately releases interleukin-1b and interleukin-18. That leads you down a path of a cytokine storm. If you look carefully at this PowerPoint, you'll also see stimulating that NLRP3 inflammasome damages the mitochondria, and that's why many people feel fatigue. When you look at what laser does, laser not only downregulates NF-kappa B, saving the excessive expression of interleukins, it also is a mitochondrial function enhancer. So to modulate the cytokine storm, here are some of the things that I recommend. And this has been all over the news now, how melatonin is such a potent choice. Melatonin, interestingly enough, decreases acute lung oxidative damage. It decreases pro-inflammatory cytokines. It decreases inflammatory cell recruitment, and it enhances antioxidant protection, 20 milligrams. Vitamin C, also a great choice. Something that many people may not know, pro-resolving mediators. Pro-resolving mediators allow for the resolution of inflammation. You have two options in pro-resolving mediators. You can take them in supplements, or you can use a laser with fish oils to aid in the conversion to pro-resolving mediators. Ginger, quercetin, green tea. There was a study done in America on EGCG and how it prevented docking of pathogens better than any drug. They suggested that EGCG should be studied as a drug. Curcumin, low-level laser, will help you modulate the cytokine storm. As opposed to getting 6 to 8 or 10 different supplements, or in conjunction with them, you may want to use low-level laser, and the starting point is the EVRL and the FX635. In addition to that, stinging nettles has been a great choice because stinging nettles has shown to decrease inflammatory markers like interleukins and PEA. PEA, bottom line, is used to be used in the 70s as a drug. It's shown to attenuate NF-kappa B. Acute respiratory distress and acute lung injuries have occurred upon the activation of the NLRP3 inflammasome because your immune system has trouble with excessive amounts of interleukins. So you're looking at many people who have advanced side effects with COVID-19 are ARDS and acute lung injury. And now the big ticket is the acute or overexpression of interleukin 6, and it has negative consequences on a viral immune response. This study speaks to 9 severe COVID-19 patients. They had symptoms in order of fever, cough, dyspnea, fatigue. The common comorbidity was hypertension. Believe it or not, interleukin 6 was increased with body temperature, and it was also increased with some of the things that we mentioned before, C-reactive protein, LDH, and D-dimer. So the dynamic change of interleukin 6 can be used as a marker for severe COVID-19. Here is a particular video showing immune boosting and supporting protein. Here I'm going to activate the vagus nerve. I'm going to try and stimulate the thymus, and we're chiropractors. I'm going to stimulate the spine for central nervous system appropriation. Hi everybody, it's that demo portion where I want to show you some immune boosting, immune supporting protocols with the lasers, really pointed at trying to decrease that possible cytokine storm. So the patient will come in, you'll start them in a supine position. You're going to go for 3 different protocols total, 2 in a supine and 1 in a prone position. You're going for the thymus gland. The thymus gland is a tremendous immune boosting gland. It shrinks as we age. Thymus gland is right behind the breastbone. So I use a red and a violet light for the thymus gland. Frequencies are already put in, and I'll go right to the thymus with the red and the violet laser, 635 and a 405 synergistic combination, and I'm not applying any pressure, and I can clearly, if I want, keep it right on the skin or get a little distance if that were to be covered. So that would be the thymus gland protocol. Great starting point. Now, I've seen a lot of different protocols for immune boosting, and I think that sometimes we overlook the fact that the vagus nerve's number 1, believe it or not, its number 1 function, if you will, is to decrease peripheral inflammation, in addition to, of course, allowing the gut to brain to communicate. Having said that, I'm going to go to the acne setting. I use the acne setting for the vagus nerve, and I'm going to go for the medulla oblongata. I'm only going to do the right side. Down through the transverse colon. Wave back up, medulla oblongata, brainstem, down through the transverse colon. Remember, it's a 80 to 90% afferent nerve. It senses what's going on in the gut, so you'll be fine if you also incorporate it in a succeeding video. You'll see this, the gut protocol, and you're going to do both sides. I just started on the right side because the right side's got the ileocecal valve over here. So both sides. So you would do the vagus nerve for immune boosting, kind of been overlooked. And last but not least, if you would switch, have the patient go in a prone position. I'm going to keep it, the EVRL, I'm going to go to both a red and violet protocol. I'm going to go to a setting there, and I'm going to go for the spinal cord. And we forget about that. We are chiropractors, and we forgot about the central nervous system. So I'll do the spinal cord right here in a prone position, wave it. And if you have the opportunity, if you have a base station, here's the accelerate. Just turn the accelerate on. And you could just use the accelerate if you'd like for the spinal cord as a finishing touch. Go up through the brain to get part of the brain in the central nervous system. And I have one more little trick up my sleeve for you. If you happen to be interested or have the FX635, what a great thing to implement. Put it right over here, get it in her area, get it in her spinal cord area, and just let's go. And now she has that going along. And just as I finish, if you've got two things, if you happen to have a handheld and FX, there's a multitude of things you can do. The EVRL is going to get you everywhere you need to go. It's a great handheld. I'm showing you the accelerate. If you had a PL touch, so be it. FX635 is fabulous. Just remember that one of the biggest things that we could consider is keeping our patients' immune health strong. In this era where now it's just cascaded, where everybody's talking about it, I can guarantee you if we talk immune boosting, and immune support, people are going to come and seek us out. So now you saw immune boosting and a supporting protocol. Let's move on. So I love the NRF2 pathway. That's an antioxidant pathway that inhibits interleukin-6. Most people don't look at this pathway. This has become a very popular conversation piece on the NRF2. Laser is able to stimulate the NRF2. So this antioxidant pathway decreases the major culprit in the cytokine storm now, which is interleukin-6. There is a fecal oral transmission of COVID-19. This has been overlooked. It doesn't surprise me. I've always talked about the gut being the house of your immune health. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. So they found out that their most abundant cell receptors in the lungs are equal to the amount of cell receptors in the enterocytes, in the ileum, and the colon. So these ACE2 receptors are equal throughout. So if you damage your gut, you damage your lung, you damage your lung, you damage your gut, etc. 53.4% of patients had a SARS-CoV-2 RNA in the stool that had tested positive. 23% tested negative, but still had the virus in the stool. The bottom line is the virus sheds 2 weeks after the decrease of respiratory issues and 4 weeks after the abatement of fever. So your gut should be considered in your protocols for COVID-19. There's growing evidence that the GI system is an alternative route for SARS-CoV to release and get through the body. So I use this all the time. This is one of my favorite slides. It's sort of, if you will, Simon has called it my calling card. I'll be very quick with this. So essentially, I normally go into grave detail. However, let's just talk about gut health. 80% of immune cells are in your gut. It's where your macro and micronutrients are absorbed. Your small intestine, which is a misnomer, is about 95% of the length of your intestine. It's a thin, single layer epithelial cell that has the thickness of a single wet paper towel. When unraveled, has a surface area of a tennis to a basketball court. Its purpose, when semi-permeable, is to absorb food, nutrients, and vitamins. When it's more permeable, or there's intestinal permeability and integrity of the barrier is damaged, you have excessive things passing like bacteria, pathogens, undigested food particle, viruses, and the such. When it passes your gut, your immune system now senses it and determines if it's self or foreign. Clearly, if it's not something that it's seen so well, it senses this thing that's past the gut, which we term an antigen, and now you have an antigen antibody attack, and then you can have localized, systemic, ultimately leading to autoimmunity. some of the things you want to look at the lower level is food sensitivities. Do you have food sensitivities that damage your gut, or because your gut is damaged, you have food sensitivities? Yeast, fungus, bacterial issues. An unleveling of good and bad bacteria is called dysbiosis. You need about 85% good bacteria to bad bacteria. In addition to that, the ultimate term that we like to use is leaky gut. So if we have leaky gut, we have an onslaught of toxic and chemical overloads going to the liver. So you have liver dysfunction. 50% of people that were studied, believe it or not, that were in the ICU had non-alcohol fatty liver disease. In addition, if you have leaky gut, you'll have a higher incidence of blood sugar problems, insulin resistance, prediabetes, and diabetes. In addition to that, you also have a higher incidence of obesity. So we talked about obesity being the lifestyle issue that most damages, causes the comorbidities in COVID-19. How about the gut leading to obesity as a consideration? In addition, leaky gut, leaky heart. Leaky gut leads to autoimmunity, thyroid. Leaky gut leads to an increase of cytokines, which cause arthritic and joint pain. So if you have gut damage, chiropractors, we also have the musculoskeletal system that is damaged. Leaky gut causes the release of MMPSs, matrix metalloproteinase, your body's own proteolytic enzymes, which are released at the time of inflammation, which eat fibrocartilage. Leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky gut, gut on fire, brain on fire. So the gut, if it's damaged or compromised, can truly lead to a panacea, and I really want to not use panacea in a negative light, panacea of damage throughout the body. Interesting, the microbiota, the influence of the microbiota in viral infections. The microbiota has the ability to protect it. It has the ability for indirect promotion, and it has the ability for direct promotion in prevention of antiviral immune responses. And something new in America, now I'm actually lecturing all on this because I brought up, and I found in the literature, the gut to lung connection. When I say the gut to lung, there's a multitude of ways that the gut and the lung communicate, one of which is the vagus nerve. So let's take a look at the different means in which the gut and the lung communicate. Remember, the gut and the lung is a bidirectional crosstalk that occurs between the gut and the lung, which has been termed the gut-lung axis. Intestinal disturbances have been observed in certain lung diseases, which have been shown to be mediated by the gut bacteria and some probiotics, which have shown beneficial effects on lung health and the treatment of respiratory disease. It stands to reason that a deeper understanding of the gut microbiome and its role in respiratory disorders will aid in the design and development of improved treatment for lung disorders. The gut and lung microbiota are clearly linked by nutrition, immune system, and digestive and respiratory health through mutual communication linking this interesting axis. Take a good look at it and you'll see that through the oral pharynx, environmental products and bacteria communicate or allow the communication between the gut and the lung. In the blood, you've got your bacterial fragments, your short-chain fatty acids, and your immune cells, and via the nerve, signals from the vagus nerve. So this really depicts a healthy lung microbiome or microbiome on the left, whereas on the right, you have dysbiosis in the lung. That dysbiosis comes mostly from translocation of bad bacteria, which hits the lungs, and you'll get some oral dysbiosis. Having said that, this leads you down a path of an increased incidence of ARDS, acute respiratory disease syndrome, and possibly sepsis. Here now we're looking at the gut's impact on hypertension. So things that can hurt the gut, they're not limited to this: bad food, bad lifestyle, drugs, has an adverse effect on blood pressure. Well, how can I substantiate this? Here's a study that talks about the gut's relationship with hypertension. In this study, there were 41 patients that had ideal blood pressure. They also had 99 patients that had hypertension. They had 56 patients that had pre-hypertension. The conclusion was patients with pre or hypertension had a reduction in bacterial diversity. They were tested. Interesting. So the more diverse, the better the bacteria, the lower the blood pressure. The more dysbiosis and lack of diversity, increase in blood pressure. Phase 2 of the same study. Take a look, same study. Scientists transplanted fecal matter from patients into germ-free mice. The mice that received the fecal matter from hypertensive patients also developed hypertension. So many of the hypertension in this setting was based on, once again, the gut bacteria. In another study, conversely, researchers transplanted feces from mice without hypertension into mice with hypertension, and the result is what you would have thought, a reduction in blood pressure with mice with hypertension. The gut bacteria, the microbiota, has a specific effect in these delineated studies on body's hypertension. So let's talk about laser in this setting. What can laser do? Well, here we have low-level laser on the cytokine system in patients with chronic viral hepatitis. The measurement of blood cytokine levels in those treated with low-level laser revealed a decrease in IL-1 beta, IL-6, TNF alpha, and had a rise in a pro-inflammatory. It's really an anti-inflammatory, but a small rise in a pro-inflammatory interleukin-4. The conclusion was very simple. The use of low-level laser has marked benefit effect on cytokine system on patients with viral hepatitis. In addition, it improved the function of the vascular endothelium and its nitric oxide producing capacity. You'd be able to breathe better, and vascular endothelium is a huge takeaway. In addition, here is a study of the modulation of lipopolysaccharide, an endotoxin that's released in the gut at the time of leaky gut. LPS can induce NF-kappa B signaling pathway. That pathway leads you down a path of stimulating the NLRP3 inflammasome, which leads to the release of interleukins and ultimately is the culprit in the cytokine storm. So using the 635 decreased all inflammatory markers at the LPS gut level. So the conclusion was simple. 635 modulated the release of LPS-induced NF-kappa B signaling pathway. Here's another study done on photobiomodulation, leading to the attenuation of inflammatory response. Essentially, photobiomodulation suppressed the expression of activated macrophages. That should be macro, not micro. Inducible NO synthesis, decreased mRNA expression, interleukin-1 beta and NF-kappa B, and the secretion of overall pro-inflammatory cytokines. So laser has a very positive effect on the cytokine storm and systemic inflammation. Vagus nerve stimulation, as you all know, that was my thing. Vagus nerve stimulation is something I do on all my patients. The bottom line here, we found that vagus nerve stimulation reduced tight junction damage with those who had the expression of LPS. So it was able to ameliorate the damage of tight junction. The conclusion, vagus nerve stimulation attenuated the disruption of intestinal tight junctions. So you have leaky gut via tight junctions. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. The red light works fabulously overall for inflammation. You add the violet light in the vagus nerve, you have a dually two diode lights 405, 635 attack to enable you to decrease inflammation on multiple fronts. So here is, never seen before, a gut to lung axis protocol.
Hi, it's the demo time. I'm now going to demo the gut, how to keep good gut health, how to keep a good gut to lung axis, which is really a breakthrough in a lot of the conversation pieces in laser therapy and functional nutrition, and gut's impact also on, as we talked about, hypertension. So we're going to have somebody come here. Your patient's going to lie supine, face up. We're going to start with the EVRL, and we're going to start with just the violet light. So I'm going to turn it on, and you can see it's on. It cascades. It illuminates on my shirt. Her shirt won't illuminate as much. Just the color doesn't reverberate back. So all I'm doing is using the violet light. I am using the violet light in her abdomen, gut area, making an emphasis on the right side, because on the right side, we've got the small and the large intestines where we want to kill bacteria, fungi, and of course, we being antiviruses. There are viruses in this area. Sorry about that. So we're going to do sweep the area, and I would spend more time here than I am now. This is for demo purposes. While we have her in a supine position, I'm going to go to the upper lung, and I'm going to get the lung area, the tips and the apex of the lung, because as we know, in COVID-19, it's the upper respiratory area. In addition to that, I really want to make a point. I do believe that we've overlooked the gut. It's 80% of our immune cells. It's where macro and micronutrients are absorbed. And I don't think we've talked about it enough in COVID-19. I think it's been an oversight. So I would definitely use all my protocols that we talked about and incorporate the gut. Now, also, if you just have the EVRL, one last thing with it, we'll go to user, and I'm going to turn on both the red and the violet, and then I would sweep the gut again with both the red and the violet. The red is going to be very helpful at 635 nanometers. Help with interleukins and help with any kind of epithelial wound healing. So run it there. And if you have the Pierre resistance, if you have the FX635, I would bring it in here without question. And I would bring it in this area, get it right in the gut. Again, this is all demo purposes. That's why I have a lot of space. I'm putting it right here. I'm actually getting in the kidney area, close enough to the kidney. She's petite enough to do that. And I'm going to turn it on. And there you go. Now, lastly, if you have an FX635 and an EVRL, I'm going to go back in. I'm going to go to the acne setting. And at the same time with the acne setting, I'm now going to do the apex of the lung, gut lung. One more time. Obviously, I'd spend a little more time. And I would also add the violet light where I have the FX635. So once again, the gut acts the gut to lung, and when you positively affect the gut, you're also positively going to affect your hypertension. That's been proven. And I also got the kidneys because she's petite, and with these pretty staunchly long, powerful arms, you're able to get the kidneys also. So again, I do a lot of functional medicine. I haven't found anything that goes in conjunction with the nutritional protocol for the gut like the FX635 and EVRL. Be back in the webinar.
So as we hit the finish line, I appreciate Simon speaking about it at the beginning. Keep an eye out. My book, Superhighway to Health, 7 Steps to Optimizing the Gut-Brain Connection, was scheduled for August. Hopefully COVID-19 does not affect it. Erchonia has been great. They are detailed in the book, and they're going to support it, so you'll all have the opportunity to get a copy. I always like to end towards the end of a webinar with a quote. I think Jim Rome is a fave of mine. He stated, "Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live." And before I bring Simon on with your questions, I didn't want to keep you there forever because I know the questions take a little while, and we had only scheduled 9 to 10, but this information was important. If you need to get in touch with me, there is my website, drrobertsilverman.com. Please follow me on Facebook, Dr. Robert Silverman, or Instagram, Dr. Robert Silverman. Every day, Eastern time, 1 o'clock, while we're going through COVID, in the weekdays, I've been doing a Facebook Live. So it's all about different information pertaining to COVID-19. And as a practitioner, I invite you, and Simon invites you, to, on my Facebook group, the Mastermind Laser Group. We have a large amount of people. We're going to start posting, and we may even do some interviews and webinars in that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring the scholarly Simon Ramshaw back.
What an introduction. Thank you for that, Rob. Very much enjoyed it. Very insightful as usual, and I hope everybody else did. So let's have a look at some of the questions that have come up. There are quite a few hellos and what have you, thank yous. What if we use infrared light with violet light for enhancing immunity?
That's a good question. I'm not big on infrared light, so let's make this differentiation. And Simon, also, if they need any information, I know you have a treasure trove of this. Infrared is vastly different than laser. So infrared has been shown in studies to be 7% as effective. Laser is drastically different. Laser is much more effective. I don't use infrared, no problem if you do. I like laser light because of its effectiveness, because of the wavelength, because of the low power allowing for photochemical outcomes versus photothermal. I don't like to heat anything. So infrared has a heating component, whereas this photochemical does not. In addition, we're actually doing some videos. You don't necessarily always have to touch the skin. You can be in the vicinity and get the outcome when it's photochemical. Others, you have to actually touch the skin. And let's be real, right now, not everybody's going to let you get that close.
Great, thanks for that, Rob. Yes, just to add to that, most people are probably aware of this when it comes to wavelengths of low-level lasers. Once you start going up in wavelength, you start delivering less energy and you start delivering more heat. So usually you get infrared in between 750 and 950 nanometers. So you're delivering less energy and a slight heating effect. So with our lasers, they tend to run at 635 nanometer, 532 nanometer, and 405 nanometer. And the 405 is the violet light, which, as Dr. Rob mentioned before, it's the antimicrobial, antibacterial light, and works great in combination with the red laser on the likes of the vagus nerve. So very much also depends on what you're wanting to treat, but yeah, it's all about optimizing photonic energy delivery into the mitochondria of the cell, which is why when we do our placebo-controlled studies, we use LED because it's a non-coherent light. So as soon as it hits the skin, there's a scattering of energy, whereas with true laser diode, by the time it reaches the mitochondria, because it's coherent, you're delivering a lot more photonic energy, so we're able to demonstrate a more pronounced effect. So next question, does it increase the activity of immune system, or does it just kill the bacteria and viruses by photons?
Okay, great question. So the studies have shown, studies that I've peeled out have shown that the red light has a positive effect on immunity by decreasing specific interleukins, whereas the violet light has shown to be antimicrobial, antiviral, antibacterial. That's why at this time, if you're considering a handheld laser, the one that I believe comes to the forefront, and remember all the others are excellent, would be without question the EVRL.
Thank you for that, Rob. Let's have a look at another one. Excuse my voice, by the way, it seems to be going. Is there any hard evidence of A, measurable immunity amongst people who have had COVID symptoms? B, people who have previously tested positive prior to laser treatment, testing differently after?
It would be impossible to give you that because the testing has just started for COVID. So, and to speak a little about that, I use an antibody test here. So I'm not in the office, but the antibody test comes to your house. So I haven't been able to implement any of the positive PCRs and any of the antibodies because the testing just started. So it's too early to give a definitive documented answer to that. What I believe, I think people will have a better outcome because they always have a better outcome when they change the lifestyle and clearly when they implement laser, but I don't have the data. We don't have those data points yet.
Okay, we have our resident clinical consultant across here as well, Dr. Rob Sullivan. Still, Rob's around. He wrote an article pretty recently on boosting immune response and looking at low-level lasers' ability to do that. So we'd be more than happy to share that with you. Right, let's have a look. There's a few more thank yous and found it very educational. Somebody's asking for a letter of attendance, which is no problem. The office can sort that out in the UK. Something in Spanish, which I'm afraid I don't speak Spanish, so I'll have to translate that later and send the response by email. Again, we enjoyed it. It was most informative. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for presentation. Have you ever mentioned side effects of laser whilst using near thyroid gland?
No problem using it near a thyroid gland. The only contraindications are the same for any modality, which is typically, of course, the starting point is pregnancy and pacemaker.
Great. What looks like the final question here. Also, have you mentioned change in heart rate of the patient while using laser?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I apologize.
Have you mentioned change in heart rate of the patient while using laser?
So they're referring to the heart rate variability, and that's how I determined to use the violet light on the vagus nerve, because the heart rate variability improved prodigiously when I applied the violet light to the vagus nerve. And as we all know, if we're able to elevate the heart rate variability, the variability in the heart rate, it shows a health outcome. So that's what I've done.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Rob. I know that the gentleman actually who was asking it is one of our customers in Russia, and he's a vascular surgeon.
Fabulous question. And for the Spanish speaker, hola, ¿cómo está? Buenos días. Yo hablo español. Yo vivo en Nueva York.
That's
just a little secret for you.
Yeah, that's far more than my capabilities, unfortunately, Rob.
Yeah, you can send it to me. I'll understand it.
Now that appears to be, oh, hang on. Yes, just another thank you again. Rob, that was fantastic, very educational, very insightful as always. I'd like to thank you so much for giving up your time. And I'd also like to thank everybody for giving up their time to attend this educational webinar. It's Dr. Silverman's fourth one, I believe. Is it fourth one you've done? The third,
I think so, sir.
As well as a lot more webinars that he's actually doing for Erchonia across in the US. So I will be speaking to him after this call to see if we can come up with another worthy educational webinar for next week. Julie in the office will be sending out a link with a recording of this video, and she'll also send out a questionnaire as well. And one of the questions on the questionnaire will be, do you have any suggestions on topics that you would like to discuss for future reference? So if you can all answer that, it would be very much appreciated, because we'd like to deliver webinars that people actually want to hear. So it'll be interesting to know what range of topics you can come up with, and we would all be happy to oblige. On that note, again, Dr. Rob, thank you very much. Any other questions we can forward on to you via email. As usual, it's a pleasure.